The next one we'll talk about is patience and understanding.
Patience thing has stretched me doing on here.
And now may be a good time for us to highlight our wall that you can see here on the screen.
For me, this is progress. Alex is writing. Welcome back to our channel, and thank you once again for joining us in this another day in the life of living on Autistic Edge. I am Terry and Elaine.
And I am Lowenfield Elaine.
We are here to share with you tips and tricks of how we navigate through our journey right here on Autistic Edge.
All right. So we're continuing in our series looking at parental challenges, right? Last week we looked at the employment challenges that parents face. And if you missed that video, we're going to put a link here so that you can go and watch that afterwards. But this week we are going to be looking at some of the caregiver challenges. This was brought home forcefully to us in the most recent times. So we thought that this is an area that we wanted to shed some light on. So here.
All right, so we have a number of things to share there because the caregiving challenges are so huge. It is so wide. So this will be done in two parts. So this week we are going to look at some of the challenges and let's see what we can talk about this week, and then we'll tell you more next week. So we're going to jump right into it. There are several unique challenges with finding the right caregivers to work with our children on the autism spectrum. And this is a very delicate area. So we want to shed some light for the parents who are struggling, who may have similar challenges. And as usual, we are going to look at recommendation as best as possible as we go along. So, dear, you want to take a first hit at this and let's see what we got.
Right. So, one, you have to understand what the needs are of your own child so that you can match that against what you're searching for in a caregiver. So that's the first thing I would encourage persons to look at. Look at the preferences of your child. Look at the temperament, etc. of your child. And then you can use that to gauge as you seek assistance with the child, how that the two can work together by understanding the needs of your own child. So that's how you can know whether or not this person is right for you when you start to look at that match.
So you're saying the first thing the parents they themselves needs to know and understand their child. All right, that's a good one. Now the next area that we would want to talk about is the qualification or the specialized training for the caregivers. Now finding caregivers with the right kind of skill set and it's very difficult. What we find in the training of the caregivers, a couple of videos ago we talked about the educational challenges, and if you haven't watched that video yet, here is the link to the video just above here. You can jump back and look at that video, but because we're not going to go too much in detail, we find some similarities with the caregiving training similar to that of the educators, where the training is more or less general.
Yes.
There's not enough specific training surrounding autism. Yeah. And autism has it comes with its own behavioral challenges and unique challenges so because the challenges are so unique, then the persons in these areas need to have that required skill set.
Right.
And if they do have the training, you may find that they may not have the experience.
Before you touch the experience there, as you look at the training aspect of it,
right?
Because we as you mentioned, it's specialized, and not a lot of persons go through that specialized training. So we find that especially if the child is non-verbal or on the severe end of the spectrum, then the demand for the caregiver being a specialist becomes more pronounced. So I want to I want to highlight that particular point, that you can't just pick any any and everybody to go with the child, for example, to be at school. You can't just send a regular household helper, if you will, with the child to go to school, because they may not be equipped with the relevant training so that they can function effectively in that particular area.
And that's a big issue.
Yes.
That's a big issue that we find, in the caregiving. So talking about the experience now,
Yes.
sometimes they may have the required training or certification, but then again, you may find that they doesn't have the experience, because the experience for caregivers is normally done in a more simulated environment where, when they are in training, they will have their simulation in training. Just coming out of training may not give them the hands-on real experience that they need to work with your child. And there is another dynamic to it too. Every
Yes.
child on the spectrum is different. That's why we call it a spectrum, because everybody,
Is different.
is different. You may find that you have experience with a child that have a different need from your child. So you may work with a child before and you're saying, oh, when I had this child, this is what we used to do. But then this child come with a different challenge. So
Yes.
the experience is really a challenge in terms of finding the right fit to dealing with your child.
Right. The next one we'll talk about is patience and understanding. 'Cause that's very, very important. As any person working with a child has to have patience and understanding. Whether you're a parent, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a teacher, all of the stakeholders in the autism space have to have patience and understanding. You
It's a
have to
patience thing. You stretch me word on
you,
there.
you have to understand that there are certain behaviors that are apparent with these particular children. There are sensory sensitivity issues. There are perception issues with persons who are not familiar with the children on the spectrum. There are communication challenges. So you need patience and understanding. And now may be a good time for us to highlight our wall that you can see here on the screen. That we have a very nicely decorated wall right here.
Yeah,
This
and that
happened.
is.
Yeah, this happened shortly before we began recording this video. But we wanted it to stay to highlight the fact about this very point about being patient and understanding. Our child is writing and is demonstrating very much that he has the ability to do, his letters and all of this stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, when I looked at the wall initially, I was like, oh my God. But then again, you'd have to look at the bright side, the positive side. Alex wrote his name on the wall, right? If you look, I mean, it seemed as if he wrote it before and then he
He
was
wrote
trying to write it a
a second
second time,
time,
because you
yes.
see Alex Xavier and then you see the alien is written over the Alex Xavier. And so, no, parent, I just want to inject right here. Pick the positive and encourage the positive in what is happening. The typical child learning to write normally do these things.
Yes.
And we are going to allow that piece of decoration to stay right there in our backdrop for a little while. For me, this is progress. Alex is writing. See? On the wall.
That's
Yeah,
it.
we're gonna get it fixed sometime down the road, but we need it to be there for a while to show the progress of Alex, showing the initiative that he wants to write. He's learning.
Yes,
Yeah, that's a
yes,
good one
yes.
there.
That's a good way for us to segue into our next
Yeah,
item,
yeah.
looking at consistency. We've
Mm-hmm.
already established that routines are extremely important for the children that are on the spectrum, because they thrive on routines and they like consistency. So persons who are putting themselves up as caregivers in this space need to understand that, right? I understand sometimes you want to switch up things and make things a little bit different, but know the child that you're working with. Children on the spectrum like routine. So we have to ensure that you find someone who is stable and understands that the environment needs to be predictable for the
Yeah.
child so that they can harmonize together.
All right. Another challenge that we find is the communication skills.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Effective communication is important between parents, guardians, and I mean other stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
Probably you may have to relate to teachers because they're gonna be in the classroom with the teachers.
Right.
They are going to be the one most time to attend therapy sessions because parents will really and truly have to work.
Mm-hmm.
So you find that the caregivers are going to be the ones that are going to be interacting closely with the different stakeholders
Right.
dealing with your child. It is imperative for them to be able to convey information
Mm-hmm.
between the stakeholders and effective information. Remember again, they have to be the voice of your child
Yes.
because our child is nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
And while Alex is minimally verbal, we still need a lot where it comes to communication. He's not able to functionally tell you everything that he needs. So the caregiver must be able to interpret the communication style of the child and to convey, because you can have a lot of misunderstanding going on there, especially in time when there are behavioral challenges
Right.
like what we are going through now.
Yeah, before we segue into the behavioral challenges, though, you make a very good point that the caregiver is the representative of the family in
Yeah.
these spaces. So when you go into
Right.
therapy spaces, when you think about school and so on, as
Mm-hmm.
parents are not in those spaces most of the time.
Yeah.
So the caregiver has to have an appreciation of the child, the needs of the child, the
Mm-hmm.
objectives that you're trying to achieve, and so on,
Right.
and measure what is taking place in the school against that, in the
Mm-hmm.
therapy
Mm-hmm.
sessions against that, and then report that back to the parents as well, so that
Right.
we are kept in the loop to understand what is taking place and if there needs to be any kind of intervention, any kind of remedial things that need to be done,
Mm-hmm.
so that we
Mm-hmm.
are remaining on achieving the objectives as they're outlined. So I think that's an
Right.
excellent
Yeah,
point when
man.
it comes down to the
And
communication.
again, you see, as we mentioned, most of the time they are the ones in school
Yes.
with the children, so they spend most of the time with the children in the absence of the parents. It's
Yes.
really the caregiver, so they should be able to talk about the progress of the child as
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
because there will be things happening there with them that we are not able to see.
Mhm.
So I like when I come home and I get a good report.
Mhm.
If things goes well, I want to hear it.
Right.
If things goes bad, I still want to hear it,
Mhm.
because we can both look at recommendations together, and we are able to support them together. So being able to have open feedback,
Mhm.
this is very important. So it is imperative for the caregiver to have good or excellent communication skills,
Beautiful.
because that is important.
Right.
Right.
Now we look at behavior management. Uh, we highlighted in several of our other videos
Yeah.
the behavioral challenges that come with working with a child that is on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, one of the intervention therapies is behavior therapy,
Yeah.
applied behavior therapy,
Mm-hmm.
because of those challenges that are inherent with this particular condition. So being a caregiver means that you have to have an appreciation that behavior and managing child behavior is going to be a critical part in the role that you're asked to play. So it's important for you as a caregiver to
Be
educate
skilled,
and
right?
to be skilled in this particular area and
Mm-hmm.
understand, and don't become overwhelmed when you start to see the
The
behavior start to
behavior.
come out. It's now needing to dig deep into your knowledge and experience and
Mm-hmm.
expertise in how do I navigate this space, understanding that this is an area that is
Right.
a real need for children that are on the spectrum.
And try not to take the behavior personal, because
Yes.
sometimes the child may do or say things,
Mm-hmm.
and for those who are verbal they may say things, and for those who are non-verbal they may do things that to the adult it may seem a little bit disrespectful
Yes.
or not appropriate, or more to say inappropriate, right? Because they tend to have a lot of inappropriate behavior.
Yes.
So the importance of the caregiver here is to be able to identify the behavior, know how we are going to navigate the behavior, be able to come up with strategies along with the parents and the ABA therapist, if you have one working with, and to kind of balance with the behavior. So overall, they should be able to work with the strategies and to help even look at strategies as to how to manage and reinforce the behavior techniques needed for the child. All
Yes.
right.
All right. So availability and commitment.
Ooh.
You have to find somebody who is committed to the role. This is not something that you do as just a side hustle or something that it's a fleeting kind of a thing.
Right.
Persons who perform best in these roles are persons who are committed to these roles. Some persons
Yeah.
that have a real love for children and not just something that is at the
You're just doing it
surface.
because you don't have a job.
Right. Or
Yeah,
you
because you
just, yeah.
right. You find that some people go into certain job functions
Mhm.
because I mean they don't have a job. Probably is the easiest one you can get into
Yeah.
because you don't need a degree or a high school diploma
Mhm.
in order to do this. Because you don't need one of those higher education per se in
Right.
order to do this. You may just need a certification. So it's the easiest certification you can get into. So some persons may just gravitate to it because of that.
Yeah. But even with that there, I've
Mm-hmm.
found that the persons who are more educated in the space, who
Mm-hmm.
they would have done their certification or even potentially gotten a first degree and so on, they understand better on
Mm-hmm.
how to function. But
Right.
it's not just about, as you spoke about education and stuff earlier, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just the head knowledge. It's really having that love for children
Yes. Yes.
and then caring for them and working through the challenges, because the challenges are going to be
Yeah,
many. So
they're gonna be
I
there.
want to lift my hat to all of the stakeholders in the special education space.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest job
Nah.
in the
No,
world,
it's not.
and for you to
Not.
voluntarily or on your own trying to make a decision to say, okay, I want to work in this space. I lift my hat to you, because the challenges are many and it does require a level of commitment. So for the caregivers, commitment paramount, and availability as well. This is an area where, unfortunately, somebody in the job don't have the luxury of spending a lot of time away. You have to ensure that you're working the function consistently and
Mm-hmm.
making yourself available, you know, right throughout. Because if we have the breaks and the gaps and so on, then it will affect the progress of the child and the development that you're expecting to achieve.
Right. The next one I want to look at is compatibility. And I mentioned compatibility because you may have a good caregiver that have the skill
Excellent
set, yeah, good
qualifications.
qualification, may
Yeah.
have good experience as well,
Yes.
and have a lot of the stuff that you would have want to employ
Mhm.
for your child,
Mhm.
but then they are not compatible with your child
Right.
because some of these children, them just as though they are picky eaters, they are picky with people that they do. They have a way of feeding from your energy,
Mm-hmm.
where if the person does not have that positive energy or that drive to connect with the child, then the child may tend to start give a pushback,
Yes.
and you may see the change in their behavior and that kind of stuff. So we have to pay attention to that because we may think you get the right skill set and
Mm-hmm.
the right caregiver, but then at the same time that caregiver may not be the best fit for the child.
Right.
No, that is going to impede the process. So it really and truly, you have to make some hard decisions sometimes,
Yes.
and that's just it.
Yeah, and that's why we spoke about understanding your child's needs at the
Yeah.
top of this video, because
Mm-hmm.
it's knowing those needs that will help to drive the compatibility, because you want to
Yeah.
match the needs of the child against the person that
The
you're
person that you're
hiring
hiring,
for
right?
the particular
Mm-hmm.
role. And
Mm-hmm.
understanding too that there has to be there a bond between the caregiver and the
And the child,
and the child. If
right?
they're not able to forge a relationship, then that's a huge red flag that that person may not be the right person in the role. They may not be abusing the child. They may not be they may be checking the other boxes, but if they are not able to forge a bond with the child, then that may be a challenge.
You just said something that just, I have to segue into this one.
Yes.
And with the limited resources, because remember, these resources are not plentiful.
Yes.
And then when you find somebody who you say, okay, you can work with, then the child may not be bonding. It's a similar thing as having a speech therapist, because we have 7 on the island. And if we choose to use one that is available and the only availability that you have for that speech therapy, we might end up with the same thing where the child does not bond well with the speech therapist, and that becomes a bottleneck to the child's progress.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a lot. It is a whole lot. All right.
All right. So the next one is really looking at safety awareness. Right?
Yeah.
Children on the spectrum, they don't, I don't want to say they don't care much for safety, but they don't have a huge sense of danger on
Yeah.
most occasions.
Mhm.
They'll run out in the road not understanding that a car is approaching. They might approach a dangerous animal like a dog and so on, thinking that it's a pet and so on.
Yeah.
They may in the home approach the stove when it's on, turn on the flame and be thinking that it's good, it's something to be play with, etc.
What stood out there was that lady who shared her experience with us when we went on that presentation. And she told us about her child out in the middle of the road in the night. I mean, the safety concerns are very real when it comes to these children.
Right.
And as such, we have to have a caregiver who is very assertive.
Yes.
To make sure that they are able to pay attention to every little nitty gritty. Remember, you have to turn your back sometime to do some things. But and again, that is why we put safety measures in place, because if you want to know more about safety, we did a video on how to secure your home, and by
We also did
adding
one
in
in the car as well.
right, we talk about safety in the home. Check this video up here. We also talk about safety in the car, and you can check that video here. Again, we put the link here to those 2 videos. So it's about safety all around. And the caregiver has to be very assertive in paying attention to the environment and the possible safety threats or hazards that might be around. So you can't find, so you have to make sure, say, you be very plain and straightforward in what are your safety areas. So make sure your home is safe. If you're taking them to school, you may need to pay attention to the environment sometime and call out potential safety hazards, so that you can make sure that all around there is safety. Traveling safety, if they are traveling with somebody else, because sometimes parents, you may not be able to do those school pickup and they may have to travel with other transportation. Look at some of the safety with the drivers that you are sending your child with, because it's just a huge concern. And your caregiver must be able to identify and point out those safety concerns, so in order to protect the child.
Right. I want to add something there. In an age of technology and the use of mobile phones and persons constantly being on their phone, etc., while we appreciate the tool, the phone being a tool that can be used in certain regards, the caregiver has to make sure that he or she is not distracted by the use of your phone, because these children are very, very smart and astute. They know when to time doing their thing. Just the minute when you took up that phone to respond to a text or something is the minute that something happens. So you have to remain vigilant as you are caring for these children, because anything can happen in an instant.
There is this other area that we have talked about so often in a lot of our other topics, and that is the cost associated with our caring for our child. So caregiving is an additional cost.
Yes.
It's an additional cost. If for you to get the real good caregivers, you may have to pay a tidy sum to get the good experience, the one that have the all the different areas checked that you would have wanted to be it not cheap. And this is an additional cost to the already long list of costs that we have to deal with.
Yes.
And I mean, there are some parents who just cannot afford the caregiving cost. They
Yes.
can't afford it. There are some children who they need caregivers to go to school, and because the parents cannot afford these caregivers, they have to. These children are at home.
Yes.
Because the challenges of all the additional costs that comes with such strain, allow these children not to be able to get the required. It's good though, and I just want to highlight this, that based on the seminar we attended last week, the Ministry of Education in our area, of course, they are ramping up support in terms of financial support to help persons who need caregivers. And the training, no, they are training some caregivers. As to how effective this training will be is another thing. So we hope that it is in the area of autism where these persons can understand the challenges and be able to speak to the challenges when the needs do arise.
Right. I want to add just a little bit too here, there, that you have to probably pay. You said it a little bit, what I wanted to highlight. You have to pay a little bit more to get exactly what it is that you want, right? So it depends. If you're paying the bare minimum, you may not be checking all of the boxes that you need. So when you examine the needs of your child, when you understand the objectives that you want to achieve, and then when you're looking to recruit somebody to assist in the space, it may mean that you have to spend a little bit more. We spoke about the costs associated with autism and the parental challenges that comes there in a previous video. But I just wanted to highlight that although this is one of the additional costs, it's one of those that you have to gauge to see how much do I pay in this area.
We have spoken extensively this week on some of the challenges. Now, this is part one. Next week, we are going to look at a few more challenges, and then we are going to look at some recommendation. We don't leave without giving you recommendation in terms of what you really need to look for. And as you go along, you will find that some of what you need to look for is embedded in what we are talking about. Yeah. All right. So for this week, this is where we wrap. Thank you once again for joining us in this another day in the life of living on Autistic Edge. Don't forget to
like,
comment,
share,
and subscribe, and make sure you hit the notification bell so the next time we put out another content,
you will be notified.